In this chapter, we're going to build our map polygons one by one, and this gives us a chance to do some final editing as we go, and it's also quite satisfying because we watched the map be built. So we're going to presume that our line work is in pretty good shape. We'll probably still have to edit a little bit as we go. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the base map so that things will draw a little bit faster, but I can always turn it on as I go. So the basic idea is to select a line or group of lines that surround a polygon and then use the tool to create it. But before we do that, we have to do a little bit more preparation, and that is to convert our line shapefile into a line feature class. That gives us a little bit more functionality. The shapefile is kind of an older format. So what you can do is right click on your lines in the contents pane. We're going to go to data and we're going to export features. So this is going to make a feature class of the same data. So you can see here at output feature class lines, the export feature. So that's fine. You can change that name. So the nice thing is that it made it looks the same, but now I can turn off this lines file. Even I'll remove it, and so that it's not confusing. The nice thing is it also retained our symbolization. Now we want to look at these data in the catalog. So you can just click on catalog pane, and you can see they're in with our other data, but what we really liked is to get our feature class inside this mapping data. So it's kind of one hierarchical level higher. It contains all the other ones. But if you see, if I click and I try to push it in there, I get an error that their spatial references don't match. So we're going to have to project this. And that's because if I right click on the file we just made and I look at the spatial reference, you can see it's geographic, certain geographic, whereas the mapping database is a projected coordinate system. So they're not the same. So they don't agree, and even though ARC can handle different coordinate systems, it in this case doesn't want to. So let's type project. It's almost like you have to pronounce it's project versus project because it's the verb to project. And so the input data is our new one, lines export features. The output one, it's just going to append the projected to the name. And then the nice thing is we can use the coordinate system that one of the other data sets has already, and that easily gets that definition. So now let's run it, and that's done. So everything looks the same. But now if I close the geoprocessing, and I can take that lines export features, the projected file, and push it into my mapping database. This one we had before, let's just delete it. Keep things tidy. And then over here on the table of contents, it doesn't really exist anymore, so we can remove it. So keeping things tidy, but now everything's in the same geodatabase, so that gives us some better functionalities as we go. Okay, so after we set up our geodatabase and got our feature class, the lines projected and exported, then I still had a problem. It wasn't allowing me to edit it. So one thing you can do before you move to this next step is make sure you've saved everything. So check your edits that this is saved, and then check and saved your project. And then quit, and then restart, and that seemed to fix it. The other thing is, if you're over here on the context pane, you want to make sure that this line export feature is checked, so that means it's editable, and then we should be okay. So now we're going to construct our polygons. So if you come here, command search construct polygons. So let's start with something hopefully simple. And so the basic workflow is here in Modify Features. We're going to select one or more lines that bound our polygon. Then we're going to determine which of the target units in our geologic unit is going to be created, and then we'll create it. And so this is quite convenient. Remember, QAL is the same as QA in our mapping, and QG is the same as QC in our mapping. So I'm going to start with select one or more features. I'm going to grab this polygon, and it's a single line, I should say, bounding the polygon of QC. So I'll check this QG. Now we'll explain the cluster tolerance in a little while, but if I construct, now see I got an error. And that's because I think you see here at the top of this line, there's a gap. And remember how we talked about that? You can't have a gap when we create the polygons. It's kind of annoying and tedious to fix. But if we, okay, I somehow had a setting here where this was turned on where it would try to edit the whole polygon. So this is annoying. So I can Control Z to undo that. Let's just turn that function off. And now when I edit, I can just move one vertex at a time. So and now place say check. So now we can try to create that polygon again. So I'm going to go back to the construct polygons. I've got it selected. I want it to be QG, and I'll say construct. Wow, and it worked. So we've got this nice big piece of QC there. So that's how we do it. We'll see there are a number of tricks to this. And so you just have to go through this one in here, which I know is dripping springs. However, you can see already that I've got a problem here. This line doesn't close out. So before we can even attempt it, let's fix that. So I select the line, and now I want to edit the vertices. So I need to pull that there. Say check. And let's just do a kind of an inspection here to hope for minimum gaps. Okay, look at this. These lines we drew earlier are where we transition from approximate to known are going to give us a problem. So let's take this guy, and I can bring that vertex over. Okay, and then remember, we're going to use my boundary as part of the polygon definition, just like we would use the edge of the map. So let me zoom back out. So for this one, we have to select all of the bounding lines to create our feature, or to construct our polygon. So I've got to select. So I shift, select each piece. And don't grab those pieces of barns right there, because that'll confuse things. Okay, so I've got all of the lines that are contributing to the boundary of the polygon. So let's see if we can be so lucky as to build it on the first try. So that's YDS construct. And it worked. Now one thing we can do is sometimes if they fail and you don't you can't find where the errors in the lines are, you can make this cluster tolerance larger. But in this case, we didn't need to do that. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a few more, and then I'll make some comments as we go. So here I've got a situation where I've been selecting the lines bounding this piece of Pioneer just to the west of that YDS we drew, and I've ended up selecting the polygon boundary we're creating, and we don't want to do that. Turn off that layer, and now I can't grab it. So now let me try to okay, so now I've got it defined without turning on the geologic unit. Now those guys are turned on. I can now choose it as a YP and construct. So you can see this is a little bit tedious, but it works like a lot of this activity. So let's save every now and then, and we'll keep going. One of the things we can do, turn off the selectability. So over here in the contents pane of our geologic unit. That way, as we're selecting, like in this case, I won't select the polygon that we've just drawn, but I'll just select the lines. But I still can use that polygon those polygons to help me. So one of the things we see here, I'm working on what's a big chunk of QC on the side of this hill. And what I've learned by experience is it's good to break it. And so we can put a little helper contact in here so that we'll just do this part of the polygon and we can delete it later once we get a little further. What let's do is create one of these other features so we'll remember to get rid of it. And so I can just draw from here to there, and now I'm double click to finish. And what we should do is basically split it so that we can break it into two bounding lines instead of the line that goes all the way around. So I'm just gonna remember how we do this. If I click here and there, and now I'll do check, it should break that one. And also I'm gonna check there. Okay, so I've got the one side. So now let's try to make our polygon again. Okay, so I've got the bounding lines selected, construct, and so it says edit operation failed. So I think there's probably a little gap there, and now I'm getting impatient, and this will happen to you. So let's change this to like 1 meter, and so that just means we can sort of tolerate a certain number of gaps and try to construct it. There. I think there were a few issues here where as we come in, we can see that the lines weren't perfect. Okay, now I'm going to do a bunch of them, and I'll do kind of high-speed view. You can just watch me go, and I'll stop and comment if there's a particular trick that's worth mentioning. Okay, so you can see in this case, I thought I was making a QA of this little polygon, but I made it of the whole thing. So this is not what we want. So if you go back to the geologic units and you attribute table, it's that one which I can see. So if I delete it, I can keep going. So that's a trick that you want to be aware of. The other thing that's probably going to happen is you notice I'm using the map boundary to help, and the map boundary is a single line, and I think we need to split the map boundary so that it won't cause us so much trouble. Which would mean to continually make large polygons. So let's just go ahead. I've highlighted that map boundary. I'm going to split it a couple of times. So remember, once you have it highlighted, you just draw a little line across there where you want the split to be. Check. So those are kind of arbitrary, but it just breaks it into smaller pieces, and I think we'll be happier with that. Notice here, I see that I prefer if the YXM has a little bit of a gray to it. So I can change that there. Got away with that one at 0.5 meter for my cluster tolerance, so that might be such where I don't really need to go and do a lot of cleanup. So one thing here, I want to point out YD, this diabase that's around this G or QC, and I want to get all the polygon around here, but I know the line that defines this QG polygon is almost continuous, so I'm going to split it in a way that will ensure that when I select it, it doesn't look that it's close. So if I select it, and then I think this will work, if I split it here and split it there, and I also split it over here, then that'll keep it basically open. And then notice this also have my two helper purple lines here, so I'm just going to go for this part of that QD. Just here, I'm going to go on the other side, so I need to actually split kind of in the opposite sense. So just a little split here and one on this side. And no, I don't know if you saw, but I split also the bounding line. So you can see I'm struggling on this one. I don't exactly know why, but we just, make a smaller piece, and maybe that'll help us. So something about it is not working. Maybe easier to cut this map boundary some more. So you can see there's something bad in there that was required the tolerance to be 1 meter. Okay, by some miracle, I've gotten my mapping done. And if you were following along, you see a lot of what I was doing was cutting lines using split tool and using my helper lines to break these into smaller polygons. So this is pretty good. One thing I want to do is I'd like to change the YM is the one I want to change to a kind of a lime green, and the Troy I want to change to a dark green. Okay, so if you were watching, you may have noticed that I made an error, and I called this unit Martin. It should be the Troy, shouldn't it? So what let's do is if we go change our contents, we can turn geologic unit back on to select it, so I can select that polygon. And now if I open the attribute table, I'll have to go find it, which is right here. And then I can double click on this, and I want this to be YT, enter. And so you see it change the color. So that's an important editing capability that you'll want to be aware of. So it's an okay looking map. The last thing we can do, data feature class selected, so I can search for transparency, and I want to make the transparency, let's try 50%. And then if you go down and turn our base maps back on, our map looks really nice because we have semi-transparent polygons, and you can experiment with that to, if you want it to not be 50%, but 75 or something, but it's starting to look pretty good. I'm excited about our map. There's still some content issues. I feel like the top of this ridge should really be the dripping springs instead of mapped as fully colluvium. Okay, so we're almost done. I'd like to label our polygons. So click on labeling properties. We want to have the source be from the unit column. And let's apply that. And then I think if we come here, right click, label, you see that they're displayed, but they're kind of small. So let's go to our symbol. We need to make the size be much larger. Let's say 20 point, what's that do? Too big. How about 14? It's not too bad. And our map looks good.